So yeah, we go through the oligopolistic curve now. So again, you guys have an idea here what to expect going forward. As I said, you know, at your level, they won't ask you for any deep analysis on this. We have the same curves we know, and I'll construct one again to show you how this can be done, right? It's the same logic we applied. The same MR is equal to MC at the profit maximizing output. It's just that we have some sort of, as we said, a kinked demand curve now, right? So indicate to me in the chat if, well, let's go straight over into the notes app, right? So this is how we construct this curve. Very low possibility that you would have to, but better to be prepared than unprepared, and it's nothing too difficult. So again, we always start by labeling our axes properly. So again, this is the equilibrium position. Oligopoly, right? So again, on this axis here, we have price, shown by the dollar sign, quantity here, shown by quantity, which is denoted by Q, right? So first things first, we have our demand curve. Again, it looks just like our monopoly curve, except it, let me undo that. Yes, it looks just like the monopoly curve, except, right, it has this kink to it, right? So the top here, the curve is what we call the curve at the top here is elastic. Let me just write that. Demand is elastic. On the bottom here, it is inelastic, right? We did those concepts before, right? Where it is inelastic, what does it mean? When price changes, demand doesn't change by that same proportion. And elastic means when price changes, demand changes by a lot, right? So let us construct this as I said. So on the outer part, this here is our demand curve, and it is also our AR curve, right? So this is AR also equal to demand, right? So D is equal to AR, right? So just as our regular imperfect competition curves, then we have now the what we call it, the MR curve, right? The MR curve is inside. However, there's usually this line here. So when you're drawing it, the MR curve will use this line. When you're sketching the diagram to get your intended results, right? So this line will be a guide, right? So the MR, this is still not going how I want. All right, it is livable, right? So this is our MR curve. So again, now the MR curve comes to this here, and it rides along for a piece, and then goes out like that with a kink as well, right? And this is going to be our MR, right? So same concept that we know. All we need, so it's just that the MR and the AC, the MR and the AR is a bit kinked. Beyond that now, we just do exactly what we do, right? So the line what I tell you basically is the same profit maximizing output we can end up to, but I just use it there to plot it and get it easier, as we are plotting the diagram to get what we want or what we intend to get, right? So yeah, we draw our, where's the profit maximizing position? Remind me. What is the quantity or what is the position? right? Correct. MR is equal to MC. So for some reason it is here, right? It can be anywhere on this curve, but we just saying is here, right? So this is the profit maximizing output. So you can write this here is QM. Let's say QM is profit, or sorry, yeah, QM. The quantity that is the profit maximizing output. And this is the price that is the maximizing price, right? So I want to show you something. So the average cost now might come somewhere here, right? I want to show you something. And how do we determine if we are making a profit or loss again? Again, you don't have to go into all of these details, but because that there is our cost curve and this here is our revenue curve, all of this here would be abnormal profit, right? Are you following in the chat what just went on? Or you want us to go it over another time? And tell me. I can only know if you indicate, right? I didn't get that.
Sir, can you go it over again?
Yeah, I'm going to over again, no problem. But we understood. We got a basic idea of what just went on, and we were not really completely lost. Yeah, okay. Remember, tell me, I can only know if you are very much transparent with your understanding. Right, so as I said, you are not concerned with knowing basically the profit and what's not. So I'll just take this out for simplicity's sake, to not for overloading, right? So let's just go it back, right? Yeah, going over, but look for the things that you know, right? So you just need to remember how the diagram stay, right? So I'll leave this on as the first thing we draw. We usually draw our AR curve first. Now through the AR equal demand. And the next thing we draw is the MR curve inside. But this MR curve doesn't look like normal. It looks like this. This is our MR, right? And how do we find our MC now? Our MC looks something like this. Our MC looks like a regular MC, right? MC. And we know this is the profit maximizing output, right? MR equal to MC. Right? What do we do next? We just look at where the AC falls. The AC will fall somewhere higher. Again, it is just to get, this is our AC. It cuts it from the lower point just to indicate, and it shows you, again, we are making a profit because at this profit maximizing output here, MR is equal to MC. When we go up, our AR is higher than where the AC is. But again, we don't need to know all of this here. I'm just showing you the basic because this is not a curve you'll be grilled on at this level. They might ask you the why is it kinked, and it's good to know the demand is elastic there and inelastic. And I'm showing you this here because they can still show you the diagram and ask you something on it. So I don't want it to be strange if you have to see the diagram. But it will more ask you to construct the monopoly or the perfect competition. Right? So memorize up to here. And the line that was there, I'm just showing you. I drew it first just to show you that it is where the quantity would basically be. Excuse this on straight line, but yeah, it is where when you drop from the MR to MC, that is the same quantity you can intersect there and come down and give us the QM, right? So I'll just go over here and let you copy the other one that is already drawn. Right? Nothing much more to this here though specifically, right? So the only thing I like to emphasize though, as you copy this here, let me see if I can fit this on a page. Yeah, the only thing I want to emphasize is that in the second diagram, as you can see, when the MC changes at the bottom where there is the inelastic demand, the price remains the same, right? If it was at the top here where it is elastic, it's a different story, right? So this is why the elastic and the inelastic comes in to show you when MC changes what happens. Because MC again is the position where we are producing at. And the price would always be on this straight line draw across at the same price there. Unless it's at the top, then it would be a different story. Right, so just copy that for, right? Call it equilibrium position. King demand curve and equilibrium position for oligopolies. Right, when you finish copying the diagram, give me a 1 in the chat and I will proceed. So moving on, the logic behind why the demand curve is kinked is explained here. The demand curve is kinked. The idea is that an oligopoly firm will not raise prices because even small increases will result in them losing a lot of customers. Right? This is where the elastic demand part is at the top here. Right? The elastic demand. If they raise prices, they will lose customers. Right? And we know how elastic demand works. And similarly, so the reason why they lose customers, their competition would try to capture market share, right? However, even a large price decrease will only gain a few customers because it will result in a price war. If one, we said what was a price war earlier, and this is why we have inelastic demand. A price war is where if one reduces their price, another one will follow suit, another one will, and eventually everybody just at the lower prices with the same amount of customers, right? The curve is therefore more elastic for price increases and less elastic for price decreases. Hence the reason for the kink. Right? I'll give you a second to copy that. And again, just as before, the profit maximizing position is always MR is equal to MC, right? So we have a little analysis diagram here to show you. Actually, it's the same thing. It's the same exact thing. Just with the MC curve as a line. Remember when we did one of the past papers, they had the MC curve as a line? So this is just to show you the curve can appear like this as well. It's the exact thing we did earlier, so you don't necessarily need to copy it again. Actually, don't copy it again because it's the same thing. right? It's just showing you though that farms will not follow if prices rise. And you can see that from the nature of the curve. Right? And here, other farms will follow if prices are cut because they don't want to lose customers. So what we can move on to, as I said, we're not going to look at short run and all of these things. The oligopoly, they prefer to keep it, the major analysis between monopoly, perfect competition, and monopolistic competition, which we have to look at either today or tomorrow. Right, let me see. Yeah, monopolistic competition is there. However, I want to highlight another subtopic that we can do today, which is measuring the competition in the industries. And it'll be very applicable to the oligopoly and the monopolistic competition as we are to do, right? So the two main ways of measuring what we call, remember we talked about the term concentration of the industry, which speaks about the level of farms in it. The first thing we can use is what we call the Herfindahl-Hirschman Index, or the HHI. It's a tongue twister, right? The first time I tried to pronounce it, I said, I can't even remember, but it's a tongue twister, the Herfindahl-Hirschman Index, right? And so it measures the concentration of the industry to determine whether if it's competitive or heading to a monopoly. And we have this fancy formula here, which I will break down in a second. Right? It is calculated by the formula, and we have here the sum, and we have I, meaning, well, it's one form or how many ever forms we're dealing with, and S refers to the square of the respective market share of each company, right? So the I is to tell you how much forms we're dealing with, whether it be 3, 4, 5, whatever. But let's not go to all the fanciness. It can be found easily by just squaring the market share of each number and adding it up, right? Looking at this other example we have here, it will highlight what I mean, right? So the following market for telephone landline is run by two companies, right? I'm just making up thing by two companies. Let's say these two companies are called GT&T and DT&T. And we say GT&T controls 80% of the market and DT&T controls 20. What would happen if we were to calculate the Herfindahl-Hirschman Index, the HHI for this industry? Again, as I said, it's close. 80 is the market share of one, we square it. 20 is the market share of the other, we square it. We get 6,400 plus 400, and we get 6,800. So how do we know if this industry is a monopoly or not? Or how do we measure the level of competition? The closer it is to 10,000, the HHI, right? The closer it is to 10,000, it's a monopoly, right? 10,000 is a monopoly because a monopoly would control 100% market share, and 100 by 100 is 10,000. So 10,000 is monopoly. Anything high like this here mean it is an oligopoly with well, in this case, only two forms, right? So do you understand how we calculate this? We simply square the market share of the farms in whatever sector we're looking at that has the oligopoly and add them all together. Does it make sense? And are you following what we just went through? Indicate whether it be your mic or in the chat box for me. I'm making sure all and every single one of you reply and follow into that before I proceed. What we have now is another measure we can use to determine the level of concentration or competition in the industry. So we have the concentration ratio. The ratio measures the size of the firm in relation to the industry as a whole, right? A low concentration ratio indicates greater competition. However, if it nears 100%, it is a monopoly. So the value range is basically there, as you expect, from 0 to 100. Usually, if the ratio is between 0 to 30, it's perfectly competitive. Between 30 to 60, monopolistically competitive. Between 60 to 90, most times it's an oligopoly structure. And anything above that is high concentration and is a monopoly, right? If it reaches 100, right? So let's do an example to bring out this here. So we have three firms, right? Actually, I can bring this up and get all on the same page. Let me carry that. All right, I have three firms, firm A, B, and C. These three firms have 40%, 30%, and 10% market shares, which are firms A, B, and C having these market shares respectively. How do we find the concentration ratio? We just add up all these market shares, right? We just add up the market shares and we get 80. When we add 40, 30, and 10, we get 80. And as I said, it falls in that oligopoly range there, giving it a high concentration, right? So in this example, it gives us an oligopoly as well. I have some that you will attempt for homework, right? Or perhaps no. But yeah, these are some measures we can use to look at the amount of competition, the level of competition and concentration in an industry. We just did oligopolies. We can tell if the oligopoly is dominated by a small few or maybe a big few, right? Maybe a couple big producers or several big producers. From 3, 7, 10, whatever the case is, right? We know it's an oligopoly. So yeah, and we'll look at it back when we look at monopolistic competition, which I set up after this here. So this one is a bit more simple, no jumbo formula, anything like that. So I would assume that you are following as well. Indicate to me, clear in the chat. And what you'll do, for me right now, so I have an example here. So suppose we have the following firms, and we have these firms have the given share. Apple got 20%, Samsung 30%, Huawei 10%, Motorola 5, Google 5, OnePlus 10, Nokia 10, and Blue 5. These are all phone brands I'm sure a lot of you are familiar with. For homework, in this case now, since we're reaching our time, I would like you to calculate the HHI, the Herfindahl-Hirschman index, and the concentration ratio for both, right? The concentration ratio for both.